Welcome to Ask DW, live streaming on YouTube as well. I'm Biresh Banerjee, and this is the program where we want to hear from you, your questions, your comments. Today, we're talking about the situation in Bangladesh, where restrictions are being eased there in that country after the army was brought in to quell protests, which were sparked by the resumption of government job quotas. Now, the United Nations says latest reports indicate more than 170 people were killed in the unrest and is calling for a probe into the violence. The mostly student protesters argue that the government policy reserving a third of its jobs for veterans of Bangladesh's independence war and their families was a form of patronage. The country's top court has since cut that quota to 5%. And I have two great guests with me to talk about the situation in Bangladesh and to answer your questions and to take your comments as well. DW reporter Binish Javed, whom most of you will probably be aware of, she has been following these protests over the past few days with a lot of detail. She's been speaking to a number of protesters as well, and whatever has come out of that you will hear from in this conversation. And joining me from Malmo in Sweden is Tasneem Khalil. Tasneem lives in Malmo. He's also the editor-in-chief of Netra News that offers investigations and analysis of events in Bangladesh. Welcome, Tasneem, and welcome, Binish. I'm glad that both of you are here. Binish, let's just go to you first. You've been following these protests for quite some time, and in recent days we've seen in Bangladesh a state of curfew, the internet cut, the army deployed. What is the situation right now?
Biresh, the situation appears to be normal. A curfew has been relaxed and we see life coming back to normal. But this normality has come at a huge cost. The government says, as you've mentioned, there have been a lot of violence in these protests. We know that at least more than 150 people were killed. The government does say that they have set up an investigation and they deny being behind this violence and put the blame basically on the opposition. But Biresh, during these protests, we saw how the government of Bangladesh used all its power and its might to suppress this student movement. And now we have also seen videos that have appeared on social media where police brutality is quite visible. Some of these videos have been verified by Amnesty International. And we can start with one of the videos that really made rounds on internet.
We will talk about those videos in a bit, but let's just go to Tasneem first, because Tasneem, just at the outset, I'd like your opening comments on this. Who would you say is responsible for the chaos that engulfed Bangladesh?
Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, 2 words, or 4 words actually. She has the ultimate responsibility of whatever has been happening in the country. This whole crisis started from a very nonchalant comment from her, calling the protesters with legitimate demands, progenies of Razakars or collaborators. That's how this whole thing snowballed into the crisis. So, I mean, if we are to name someone, a single person, as responsible for this whole mess, it would be Sheikh Hasina.
So the question is of accountability, and the UN is also, it appears, demanding accountability, because the UN rights chief, Volker Turk, has called on Bangladesh to urgently disclose the details of last week's crackdown, calling for an impartial, independent and transparent investigation. Let's just listen to what he had to say.
Today, I'm calling on the Bangladesh government urgently to disclose full details about last week's crackdown on protests amid growing accounts of horrific violence. Latest reports indicate that more than 170 people have been killed and over 1,000 injured, some of whom were denied medical care, and many are missing following protests by students and youth movements against government policies.
And the government is now saying that it set up an independent judicial committee to look at what happened during these protests and fix accountability. Binish, can one expect the government to investigate itself?
That is the question that many protesters and many people in Bangladesh are asking, because they do not trust the government of Sheikh Hasina, and they do not trust an investigation under her government will be fair and transparent. And Biresh, one reason is because during these protests, many people, not only in Bangladesh, but also worldwide, saw the use of force and power by the government of Sheikh Hasina. And many of these videos are now making rounds on social media. Some of these videos have been verified, as I've mentioned earlier, by Amnesty International. And we can even show our viewers one of the video that was authenticated and analyzed by Amnesty International. In this video, we can see student Abu Said, 25-year-old student who was studying at Begum Ruqayya University in northwestern city of Rangpur. He's standing alone, he's unarmed, he's just holding a stick. And then we see that police officers discharged 12 gauge shotguns directly towards him from across the street. And then, so Amnesty International says that they used satellite imagery to geolocate the positioning of Said and the police officers, and they found that they were at a distance of about 15 meters during the shooting. So when he is hit, his friends take him, he collapses, his friends take him to the hospital, and Biresh, when he's brought to the hospital, he was already, the doctors say that, but he was already brought dead at the hospital. And Amnesty International's investigation suggests that a pathologist who examined the photos of wounds of Abu Said, they were consistent with birdshot wound. And Amnesty International says that the use of birdshot, which is basically a hunting weapon, they consider it to be highly inappropriate, while they consider its use to be highly inappropriate, especially on protesters. It can cause serious injuries and at times death.
Tasneem, about this particular case, has there been any comment from the Bangladesh government as to why the police felt compelled to shoot at Abu Said?
No, none, no official comments. I mean, they just say they're going to investigate, but the judiciary is absolutely controlled by the executive branch of the government. So we really don't know, I mean, what kind of independent investigation is possible under this kind of mechanisms. And on Abu Said, I'd like to add that there is another video in Dhaka, which we have geolocated and authenticated, where we can see that a protester who is injured and his friend is trying to rescue him. And then a policeman actually comes and shoots both of them point blank. I mean, the protester is not dead yet, he's injured, and his friend is trying to save that person. And after police point blank starts shooting at both of them, the injured protester dies, and his friend actually has to run away. I mean, it's one of the most brutal things. You don't even see these things in war zones. That's the brutality that is being meted out.
I just want to request our viewers on the live stream and on TV, if you'd like to get involved, send us your questions. We're trying to look at the question of accountability when it comes to the actions of the Bangladeshi police and also the government. So please send us specific questions to do with that. Binish and Tasneem would be happy to take it up. But Binish, back to you. Because you've been following these protests for so long, I believe you have also been able to find videos of security personnel firing at protesters. Is that correct? I mean, if you have those visuals, maybe we can play that for our viewers and then just discuss that.
Yes, let's first have a watch. Let's watch this video where we see armed army officer shooting, and this video has also been verified by Amnesty International. And here we see that an officer is firing an AK pattern assault rifle during the protests.
And these rifles don't fire birdshot, right? I mean, they fire either real ammunition or blanks. Is that correct?
Yes, I am not a weapons expert, but this is what appears to be.
Tasneem, you're probably looking at these images as well. Can you explain to us why Bangladeshi security personnel felt compelled to fire at protesters? Were protesters so threatening?
Well, actually, if you look at we have seen other versions of the same video and we have seen photographs from the same scene. We have identified that specific officer. For legal reasons, I'm not naming him right now here. And we could see that he is actually shooting live bullets, I mean, obviously, at protesters who were clearly, running away from the BGB, from the border guards. So he is shooting at people's back who are at a distance of, say, like 500 meters or 400 meters. That's difficult to determine from those videos and photographs. But those protesters were not in any way endangering the BGB's security or anything. And why exactly they were shooting like that, why exactly that officer was shooting like that. He, by the way, actually served as a United Nations peacekeeper before. That is also something we are also discussing these days.
Tasneem? Is that confirmed?
What is confirmed?
That he served with for the United Nations in a peacekeeping role.
He served previously. He served in a UN mission, that is confirmed, and then he also served in Rapid Action Battalion. And I'm sure you are aware that Deutsche Welle investigations and Netto News and Süddeutsche Zeitung actually did a joint investigation where we highlighted this problem very in detail. So this whole thing is coming up again and again, and is connected to what UN Human Rights Chief is saying.
Yeah. And this is something that is being picked up by those in the chat, in our community as well. Let's bring up one of those questions when it comes to what the United Nations is potentially asking for. This is a question from Mohammad Shaif Ullah, and he's asking, and I quote, has the UN taken any action for the military using UN vehicles against the peaceful student protesters? Do UN rules permit this? And he goes on to comment that a statement alone is not enough. We need action. Tasneem, can I ask you to take that one, please?
We have not seen any concrete action apart from boilerplate statements. And that is also, unfortunately, like the moment we came to know that army is being deployed, I asked my team to send a query to the Secretary General's office, trying to get a comment from them, because, I mean, Bangladesh is one of the top troop contributing countries. And we were asking them that there is this risk that UN and its peacekeeping equipment might be used. They chose not to reply to our query, the UN Secretary General's office. And just one day later, we see that UN insignias on military armored personnel carriers and helicopters were being used. And when UN spokesperson was asked about this during a press conference, he said, oh, I mean, this is unacceptable. And that's it. I mean, all we have seen are these kind of statements and no concrete action, which is very unfortunate.
Why do you think there is reticence on the part of the UN?
That is a question that can be best answered by the UN, but we understand that maybe they're hesitant because Bangladesh is a top troop contributing country. Maybe they're too much reliant on them.
Right.
But that is also a problem, right? Because how can you have peacekeepers from a military and police that is killing its own civilian population to go and keep the peace and establish human rights in other war-torn parts of the world wearing the UN helmet? It doesn't make any sense.
Let's take another question from the community on chat. And this is a question to do with the records of people who've been killed. HF Leisure asking, we know the police took death records from many hospitals. Do you have any information on this? Can I come to you again, Tasneem, on this?
Yes, we have heard reports. My own reporters on the ground have said that it is extremely difficult, and in some places, I mean, the very first day, one of our special correspondents was at the Dhaka Medical College Hospital. He could see the death register and the admittance register for a few hours. And after that, he just called me and said, well, we cannot check the register anymore because a group of people came in and just tore out the pages. So the death register at the emergency ward does not exist anymore. I mean, that is from my own correspondent on the ground. I don't have confirmations from other hospitals,
Right.
but Dhaka Medical College Hospital emergency ward, I can confirm.
Right. So that would appear, if that is indeed true, that the government was trying to potentially cover up evidence. And you were also trying to sort of speak to protesters, Binish, as to what it is that they experienced. And I think you managed to speak to and track down one of the student protesters who was explaining how the government was cracking down against him and other protesters and exactly what the government did to him, right?
I did speak to some protesters and actually one of the main protest coordinators, Asif Mahmood. I spoke to him. The last I spoke to him was on 18th July, and we did broadcast his video that he had sent me, Biresh, when he was hiding from the police arrest. And he had told me at that time that while he was recording this video, he was getting reports that student protesters were being shot at, and that he really worried that he would be either abducted or arrested. And from after 18th, his name is Asif Mahmood, and after 18th July, there was internet shutdown, but I tried several times. I was not able to connect with him. And now his video has appeared. He has sent a video from an undisclosed location to Reuters, and he basically says that he was administered sedatives and he was abused and tortured while he was in custody. And what did he say about why he believes that the state, or according to him, the state did it? Let's have a listen to what he said.
I think they took us away to keep us from making decisions about our movement. While they massacred all those people, they made some of us disappear. Some were beaten. We were pressured to stop the movement.
So, Biresh, they say that, and it's not only Asif Mahmood, Nahid Islam, also one of the main protest organizers, he also claims that he was abducted. And what they say is that the government didn't want them to mobilize people, didn't want them to strategize the protest movement, and therefore they really came hard on the protest organizers. And there are also reports now that many people still are missing, and they don't know, like we don't know anything about them.
How many people are still missing? Do
we don't have a figure, but these protest organizers and protesters claim that still there are some people that they have no idea where they are.
I just want to bring in a few comments that are being made in our chat by people. People are talking about demanding an independent UN investigation. There are demands such as from user Salam and Sons Steel saying step down Sheikh Hasina. And then there are questions about whether killers can play the role of peacekeepers, that from Mohammed Abu Taher. But Tasneem, if I can just put to you something that a minister of the government has said. This is from Muhammad Ali Arafat, who's Junior Minister for Information and Broadcasting of Bangladesh. He was speaking to media some time back, and he said, and I quote, "We can sense an invasion of a third party who got into it and started attacking the government establishment." Is this an attempt by the government to delegitimize the students and say that the students aren't behind this, but some other third party? And if so, why?
Well, thank you, Birish. That's a very good question. And, you know, it's very easy to debunk. I mean, we look at the dead bodies. Many of those we have identified. I would say 90% of them, sorry, I'm just putting a percentage there, but like most of them are young students. And my team initially compiled a list where we could see like most of the dead were 17 to 22-year-old university students without any kind of political affiliation. So if any third party is involved, as the government is claiming, who are they and why they are not dying? Why the Bangladesh government and its security agencies are killing innocent students, peaceful protesters? We can also talk about, I mean, we have seen the video, right? You have just shown that, and Amnesty Evidence Lab has authenticated that. And that was a university student who was unarmed, not posing any immediate threat to the police officers, shot multiple times with a 12-gauge shotgun. And how do they explain that? Who is the third party here? In the video, we just see two parties. I mean, unarmed protesters and the state shooting at him.
Right.
And Videsh, also, the fact that they blame the opposition itself says that they have also been facing state oppression. Khaleda Zia is critically ill. Her son is in exile. So it is difficult to really comprehend that is the opposition that powerful that they can really trigger such a massive scale of protests.
Let's go back to the government, because there are questions that are being raised in the chat about the fate of Sheikh Hasina. Let's just take two questions. This one from user Saadi, who is asking, what do you think? Will Prime Minister Hasina step down after this protest? And let's take another question on the same theme. This one from user Tired of Everything, asking, can we take Sheikh Hasina to the International Court? We need to know. I'm just going to direct both those questions to you, Tasneem, if you'd like to take them on.
I don't see any way out of this crisis where Sheikh Hasina does not either step down or she is replaced in some other way. I mean, this is something I feel has completely gone out of hand. And in order to have a stable Bangladesh, which is not a threat to international peace and security, Sheikh Hasina needs to go, because after killing more than 200, actually, at the last count, protesters like this, most of them students, a government absolutely lost its legitimacy, and I don't see how Sheikh Hasina can survive this as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Regarding the question about international court, I know that there have been some movements from activist groups and academics to bring this to the International Criminal Court. Preparatory work is being done, but that will depend on the prosecutor of the court. I mean, as you know, individuals cannot bring cases. It has to be either the prosecutor or a state party that will refer the case, or the Security Council, which is highly unlikely. But I think you mentioned something about a UN Commission of Inquiry. We at Netro News, we have already published a leader calling for it. And I think that is the first and immediate step the international community can take in order to have some accountability for these crimes.
Can I just go back to what you said earlier, saying that you see no other way other than Sheikh Hasina stepping down because things have gone past the point of no return, presumably. I wonder how you make that assertion, given that the UN, in your words, is not really coming out very strongly against the government at the moment. And as Binish just said, the opposition BNP, the Bangladesh National Party, is itself virtually in tatters because a lot of its members have been arrested or they are facing cases. So who takes over? What really is the pressure for Sheikh Hasina that would force her to step down?
Well, Sheikh Hasina is obviously under immense level of pressure from her own people. We are not talking about pressure from the United Nations. The pressure here is that the general public of Bangladesh, they're so angry at her government that in order to control the civil unrest, Sheikh Hasina has to impose curfew and deploy the military. And even then, the situation is not necessarily under control. I mean, even last night, there were nighttime raids in different neighborhoods of Dhaka, and hundreds have been arrested just last night. I mean, in the past few days, we know that thousands have been arrested. More than 10,000 people have been injured, according to a Western diplomatic source who was speaking to us. So this whole country is breaking down, and that is the pressure. And as I said, like when a state like that breaks down, it is a threat to international peace and security, and the international community has the responsibility to protect the civilians.
Let's bring in another question that has come out in the chat, being asked by a member of the community. This is to do with, again, the responses from international leaders. A specific question from Hazard, who's asking, why are Germany and other international leaders and Western countries remaining silent? Why haven't they taken any action against the dictator Hasina? Are they silent because they benefit from this? Let's just bring that to you, Binish.
This is a very interesting question, and I have seen a lot of comments on social media from analysts, from general people who are saying, if this same thing had happened in a country like Iran, where 170 people were killed by Iranian state, what would the reaction would be of the Western world? And I think it's a legitimate question. And maybe the answer behind is that Sheikh Hasina does enjoy a lot of support from her allies. In the region, if we talk, she enjoys strong support from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. She is very close to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And this is also one of the reasons, as Tasneem has mentioned, that there is now anger among the people. This is one reason why we do see an increasing anti-India sentiment in Bangladesh. India is a very close ally of the US in the Indo-Pacific, and therefore some analysts say that Sheikh Hasina enjoys tacit support of the US administration in the region. She's also now very closely working with powers like Russia, powers like China, who don't care what's happening domestically in a country. They just want to deal with a powerful government. And therefore, the outrage is basically coming from people. We see people in Pakistan, students in India and other parts of the world supporting or expressing their solidarity with the Bangladeshi students, not so much from the world leaders.
There have been protests in India already by students in Calcutta, for example. Let's just take in another question from the community. This concerns whether Bangladesh could be sanctioned. This is from user Finway, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who's asking, do you think the Bangladeshi government finally deserves to be sanctioned by the UN and European Union, because those condemnations and statements by them are not working for years now? I'll come to you, Tasneem, with this. Just based on what Binish was saying, does the geopolitics of the time favor Sheikh Hasina, and maybe that's why these sanctions maybe will not happen?
It's a very good question, and there are also some economic interests involved. What we have seen very recently, this is a bit anecdotal. The government in the last few days actually arranged a propaganda tour against different government facilities that were destroyed during the protests, and was creating immense level of pressure on diplomats to join these government-managed tours, which reminds me of how Bashar al-Assad used to arrange such media tours in Syria. Mm-hmm. And many of the Western embassies actually boycotted the tour. But some of the Western embassies, including the French, for example, joined the tour and lend their credibility and legitimacy behind such a government propaganda effort. And one of the key reasons is that France is actually trying to sell their airplanes, for example, to Bangladesh. So economic interests are also very important here. I mean, they are trying to sell Airbus and Rafael and whatnot. And as we know, Bangladesh is one of the biggest exporters of ready-made garments to Europe. So yes, I mean, we know the labor situation in Bangladesh is also terrible. Yeah. And some of the protesters are actually RMG workers. So yes, I mean, sanctions right now would be a good idea and a very good deterrent that could have helped Bangladesh government change its behavior. But I really don't see that coming. United Nations, that's another question. I mean, we have sort of touched upon that already.
Right. For viewers who are just joining us, we are talking about the situation in Bangladesh, and that's why we have this program Ask DW, which allows you to ask us your questions and send us your comments. All you need to do is go to our YouTube page, DW News, and there you will find this live stream. And in the chat function on the side, please feel free to send us your comments. To be honest, there are a number of comments. I'm finding it very hard to keep up with them. But then the general sentiment in the chat appears to be that people are demanding either an independent investigation from the United Nations or demanding that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina step down, and lots of cries of save Bangladesh. That's what's happening currently in the chat. But let's just go back to the beginning and look at why these protests and the situation in Bangladesh nearly went out of hand. Binish, you've been following these protests and you've also been speaking to a number of protesters. What is often overlooked is that many women and girl students were also taking part in these protests. And I think you managed to speak to one of them about who was sharing her experiences being in these protests.
Yes, Biresh, what was interesting during these protests was that a lot of female students female students were also protesting. And what is interesting is that they were also protesting against government job quotas that were for women. So we know that these protests started basically because the students were arguing government job quotas. And we saw that among male students, there were a lot of female students who were also angry and demonstrating and protesting against these government job quotas, which also had a 10% quota for women. Right. And these women protesters, and also Amnesty International says that the women protesters were also brutally targeted. And we spoke with one of the female protesters who got injured by a pro-government student body, Bangladesh Chhatra League, and we can talk about that later. But let's first have a listen to what she had to say.
If I share my name or my institution's name, anyone can come to my house at midnight and just arrest me without any warrant or anything. Because they have that power. And we students, we have no power. For us, the last few days were just nightmares. It still feels like a nightmare. I was attacked with cocktails by the BCL, Bangladesh Chhatra League, and the police force of the government. It left me shaken and injured. In front of my eyes, a mother and her child were brutally shot and killed. A scene that will haunt me forever.
I mean, that testimony is just, I don't know, it's just hard to listen to. I think it must be even harder for somebody who's actually seen that to get over it. But this female protester did talk about the Bangladesh Chhatra League. And I know that you've been researching the Bangladesh Chhatra League as well. What exactly is it and how is it involved in these protests?
It's a pro-government student body, and some of the students have told me that there are adult grown men who are a part of this student body. So they never graduate, or they keep themselves registered as students. And it's not only the police or the armed forces of Bangladesh that were involved in the crackdown. There are reports by Amnesty International eyewitnesses have told them that there were directed assaults by Bangladesh Chhatra League at students, and they didn't discriminate between male students and female students. They targeted everyone. Even in many news agencies have reported, women protesters have told that they attacked them, they sexually harassed them, they attacked them, especially targeting their head. So there were a lot of wounds, head wounds, among female protesters. And the students, now the student body, the student protesters are demanding that this Bangladesh Chhatra League should be banned from student politics.
Tasneem, can you bring us a bit more background on the Bangladesh Chhatra League? How did it get involved in the protests? This is not the first time they've been involved in protests, have they?
No, I mean, they have a long history of terrorizing and killing, and also being involved in petty crimes, including stealing goats, I mean, for some reason, from different parts of the country. So it's a criminal organization in so many ways. The closest example from history I can remember would be Hitler Youth in Nazi Germany, but Chhatra League probably is more brutal than that. And they have been attacking and terrorizing, regular students at all university and college campuses for years right now. And that is why there is a growing demand from the general students that Chhatra League needs to be banned and labeled a terrorist organization. And I mean, initially, in the first few days of the protest, we actually saw general students forcing Chhatra League leaders out of these dormitories, student dormitories, where they used to live like kings and queens. So, and now we don't know what's going to be the future for this organization.
Tasneem, I do need to ask you, you just said that the Chhatra League is more brutal than the Hitler Youth. Is that an extreme classification?
I wish it was an extreme classification. I said that is the closest I can come up with, because Chhatra League, I'm trying to make your viewers in Germany understand what we are talking about, but I would say Chhatra League is more brutal. They're the stormtroopers of the Army League Party and Sheikh Hasina.
Okay, we'll leave that as an opinion, but I'm not entirely sure that might be factually correct. But let's park that to the side and take a question from the community. Here is a question from Anwar Hussain, who is now asking, even now Hasina is only talking about damaged property, not a single word about murdered or arrested students. Binish, is that factually correct? She's not said anything about the students?
So basically what we say that government is maybe trying to do damage control. They're trying to build narrative. They took reporters and journalists to the burned down building of the state broadcaster of Bangladesh. So they are showing to the world that the protests were very violent, were very brutal, and that a third party, as you have mentioned, which basically they say the opposition, and that they instigated the protest leaders. And it is basically they are to be blamed, and they created such a big loss for the government of Bangladesh, so much of loss of property, so much of damage of infrastructure. This is the narrative that they are trying to build, and what the students are saying, that don't forget us, that most of the people who have been killed are the students. So instead of the government trying to talk about the crackdown and the killings, they're trying to build a narrative around the damage that has been done in Bangladesh. Very, very mild statements have come out of the government of Bangladesh, sympathetic towards the killings of these protesters.
The community on chat is also commenting regularly. The comments are moving too fast for me to name check any one particular individual, but then people are talking about Sheikh Hasina resigning. There's talk about the UN getting involved, somebody calling Sheikh Hasina dictator. Hasina, I apologize, I cannot name check everybody because the comments are flying through the chat rather quickly. Tasneem, if I can just come to you. Based on the plight of the students at the moment, it appears it is only the students who are speaking for themselves. There is nobody else to speak for them. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, they are, I mean, absolutely smart and, I mean, modern Gen Z kids, and they do own their own issues and they do speak for themselves, and they don't need any external representatives to either speak for them or tell them what to do. And that is exactly why the government is not able to really crush them.
Let's bring in a question from a user on the chat about this very thing. Carolina Vilena asking, is it possible to have a public forum between the government and students to resolve this unrest and violence? Binish, has there been any movement towards both sides talking?
So initially, when the protests began, the students say that we were holding peaceful protests against government job quotas. That was their main demand. And at one point, there was a talk, even from the government side, they were saying, at least publicly, they were saying that, you know, we will have a dialogue, we will negotiate with the students. Students were also saying the same. But Biresh, what the crackdown has done and what these thousands and thousands of injured students and more than 150 people killed, what that has done, that has now angered the students so much that they say they will not negotiate. They will not talk with the government unless, and they've put very hard and strict demands, unless they're not fulfilled. They see that the time for negotiation and talk has gone. They need justice for what has happened in the country.
Tasneem, are we at a deadlock? Because if I remember correctly, the students have put forward a list of 9 demands for the government to meet. And given that they're not talking to each other, where are we with those demands? Is it a state of deadlock then?
It is at a state of deadlock, and you cannot have a dialogue with a party that is killing you, and that is exactly what the students are saying. That we would have had a dialogue with the government. I mean, as long as they peacefully negotiated with us. Instead, they unleashed the Chhatra League on university campuses, and later unleashed the police and the border guards. And also, we have seen reports of protest leaders like Nahidul Islam and Asif being abducted and taken to some facility and tortured, also injected with some kind of chemicals. You cannot, I mean, when the government is abusing the students and it's the protest leaders like this, I think, I mean, dialogue is out of question. And right now, yes, it is at a dialogue. I mean, the deadlock. The students have very clear demands. Sheikh Hasina needs to apologize, take responsibility for the killings. Some of the ministers need to be either fired or they need to step down. Police officers with command responsibility over the killings need to be fired. I mean, these are very logical demands which anyone would agree with, and the government, I don't think, is going to accept any of them.
Just so we're clear, what we're talking about here is how the government has handled these protests, and reporter Binish Javed has been monitoring the government's actions and how these protests have been playing out over the past few days. Binish, you have also been able to, if I'm not wrong, access a video that shows how security forces were dealing with a protester during those protests. Can you tell us a bit more about what this video is and what we're potentially going to see?
Yeah, Biresh, this was one of the a very graphic videos, and it was really difficult to watch. We will only show a part of this video, which was also verified by Amnesty International. And if we could play that video, in that video, we see an unconscious student, Sheikh Ashadullah Yamin. He was a student at the Military Institute of Sciences and Technology in an area known as Sawar near Dhaka. So what we see that he's unconscious, he's injured, and he's left there the security forces do not make an effort to take him to the hospital. And Biresh, Amnesty International says that according to the international law, the law enforcement agencies were supposed to provide him help and medical assistance, and he was left alone. Later, he was still alive. Later that day, he died.
What you're basically saying is that if the security personnel who were there on that road, next to him, lying on the road, if they had provided timely medical aid, if they had intervened, he would still be alive today.
Of course, we can. I mean, this is something that will continue to haunt the family of this student. What if he had been given medical assistance in time? He may have survived. Of course, the truth we'll never know. But he was alive at that point, and medical assistance was not provided to him.
Let's take a question, particularly on these graphic videos that, like we just saw. Well, not all of it was graphic, but this is a question from Miss Misanthrope, who's saying there are now many videos of the brutality being shared on social media. Local media is not showing them. When will international media like DW show these images? I think this is one for you, Pinish, because the video that we were seeing, it is far more graphic than what we have just shown. Could you explain to us what we decide? What is the methodology we use to determine whether we show certain videos, which videos we show, which videos we don't show?
So it was a difficult decision for us because there are some videos that are very, very difficult, that are sensitive, that can hurt a lot of people if we show them the way they are. And therefore, especially the last video that we showed, we had to cut parts of it because it was so difficult to watch an unconscious student and people around him, like security people around him, not offering any help or any sympathy or any empathy to a human being. And therefore, but I do think that DW, we are doing at least we are trying to show to the people what has happened in this country. Right. And we are also trying to speak to the government and also trying to put their point of view that this needs to be investigated. And I think as we are trying to be responsible in how we report the incidents that have happened in Bangladesh.
Can you talk a bit more about how you went about verifying these videos? I know that you've been having conversations with protesters as well. Can you talk through a bit about that process? How have you been going about looking at these videos and verifying them?
So it's quite a process, and therefore we relied on independent rights group Amnesty International, and they have used different terminologies. For example, they used geolocation, they used satellite imagery, they use signboards, the location, and different ways to assess the authenticity, the date of the visuals. And for example, in one of the videos, we say they even assess the distance between police officer and the student Abu Said. So Amnesty International's evidence lab has for now authenticated and analyzed 4 videos, and some of which we did show to our audiences.
But you've also been speaking to students, right? I mean, you've been in constant touch with them, and they've been assisting you as well? Yeah,
so I have received so many messages from Bangladeshi students, and many of them, Biresh, from outside of Bangladesh. Because of internet shutdown, it's so difficult for people to connect. But when we started covering these protests, I received a lot of messages, and on my phone, I received videos. Of course, I can't verify them, so right. we have not chosen those videos, but yes, some of them are also very, very brutal. There's one video, for example, in which there are people in a building, in a house, and they are just making a video from their camera that just shows that the police is marching right. On the street. And when the I'm not even sure if it's the police or the armed forces, but when they see them filming, they direct point blank shot at them, and then the student goes behind like this. Of course, I can't verify. That's why we have not shown these videos. But Biresh, 15 million Bangladeshis live outside of Bangladesh, and for 5 days, at least for 5 days, they were completely cut off from their country, from their relatives, from their loved ones because of internet shutdown. And even though now the internet connectivity is back, telecommunication service is back, it's very, very limited. Even today, it's very difficult to call somebody in Bangladesh and just to speak with them. It seems like even now, despite curfew being lifted or despite the internet service being back, there is a lot of restriction.
Let's just look at that internet shutdown, and there is a question that has come from the community based on that. Let's just take that on our screens now. That is from Sonia 2.0, who is asking, why did the government shut down the mobile internet in Bangladesh? Tasneem, would you like to take that on, please?
Well, shutting down the internet countrywide or region-wide is not a new thing. We have seen that in South Asia before. Kashmir, in Indian-occupied Kashmir, is an example where whenever the government decides to crack down on the population, they shut down the internet and disconnect the whole region from the rest of the world. What has happened in Bangladesh is pretty much the same thing. There are two things that might be behind this. One is the law enforcement agencies want to stop the protesters from coordinating amongst each other. Specifically through mobile internet, that is one. And another is they don't really want the world to know what is happening, because if you have open internet and if you are connected to the rest of the world, the video that we watched at the beginning of the show, the protester being killed, I mean, those kind of material actually just spreads like wildfire. Inside and outside the country. So they wanted to most likely to preempt that kind of situation.
But it also had another a side effect to that, isn't it, Binish? Because as you were saying, a lot of people who live outside the country could not get in touch with their loved ones for a long time.
Yes, and I think for me, it's a very heartbreaking story because, yes, Tasneem is absolutely right that the government of India did had an internet shutdown in Kashmir. Also, during elections, I was in Pakistan when I was covering election. Mobile internet was completely cut off for one day. But the entire country of 170 million people with no internet connectivity, no telecommunication service for 5 days is just unbelievable. And so many people, so many messages that we got were that people were so worried about what was happening with their family members. Many people were not able to send remittances to their families during these 5 days with the complete country basically cut off from the entire world.
With this being the situation within Bangladesh, many people in the chat from our community are asking whether outside pressure should be brought to bear. Let's just take a few questions on that front on your screen now. This is from Mukit Hassan, who's asking, how can international leaders and organizations apply pressure on Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government to stop the violence against protesters and uphold democratic principles? And let's take another question off the back of that as well. This is from MD Chauvin, was asking, why do Western countries always follow double standards? How many lives do we have to sacrifice to get the world's attention? Tasneem, are we seeing double standards from the West here?
Of course, we are seeing double standard from the West here. And responding to the first question, I mean, if, for example, the European Union, I am a European citizen, I am a Swedish citizen, and I am ashamed of the way European Union has responded to this crisis. If the Western governments wanted to solve this crisis and stand with the people of Bangladesh, they could have done it yesterday. And they have just chosen not to do anything, apart from maybe periodically issuing boilerplate statements. So yeah, we do see double standards. And I think Binish was talking about this comparison between Iran and Bangladesh, right? We saw Masa Amini, for example, who was killed during the Iran protests, and that snowballed into this whole crisis for the regime there. Abu Saeed is the Bangladeshi version of Masa Amini in Iran. And see how the European Union or the Parliament has responded to the Iranian crisis, trying to express solidarity with the protesters, imposing sanctions, and lots of other coercive measures and diplomatic measures as well. On the other hand, in Bangladesh, some of the European ambassadors are actually actively participating in propaganda media tours. So yes, double standard, of course, double standards.
Binish, is that the sentiment that students also have? You've been talking to lots of them.
Yes, and I think it's a general sentiment, I would say, in many parts of the world. This is a sentiment that I think now many people in Global South are experiencing, that they are angry and mad at when the Western leaders and Western powers who have the power don't express solidarity with people who actually come from a very different part of the world.
Maybe that situation changes. And just to sort of bring people up to speed, there's lots of comments coming on the chat, and we're very thankful that you're sending us those comments. Unfortunately, as I was saying earlier, I cannot name check everybody, but the sentiment appears to be that people would like Sheikh Hasina to step down, and they would also like an independent international inquiry into what happened in Bangladesh. But that's about all we have time for today. I'd like to thank you, Binish, and Tasneem Khalil. Tasneem, just before we go, what do you think we are going to see in Bangladesh in the next few days or the next few weeks? Would you like to gaze into your crystal ball?
No crystal ball gazing here. What I know by talking to some of the protesters, they are trying to reorganize, they're trying to relaunch the movement. Already they have observed some religious programs today, and we are waiting for them to declare their next set of programs in the next few hours, actually. So we'll see how they engage with the government from here, and how the government actually keeps its responses.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Tasneem Khalil, thank you so much for joining us from Malmö in Sweden. Tasneem Khalil, editor-in-chief of Netra News, which has conducted many investigations in Bangladesh, including a joint investigation with DW News. Thanks so much for joining us. And Binish Javed, thanks so much for being in the studio and for bringing us that wealth of information and research, verified research that highlights the historic events that have really taken place in Bangladesh. Thanks so much for that. And to our community, thank you so much for joining us today on the live stream. We are seeing all your comments. I apologize, I cannot read all of them. They're moving too fast, but thank you so much for sharing your views, comments, and questions with us. That's it on this episode of Ask DW. We'll see you next time. Take care.